thank you, Eve. We'll call this meeting to order, Joint Revenue Committee Day 2, Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. Eve, would you please do the roll call?
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator McEwen. Here. Senator Pappas.
Here.
Representative Bear.
Here.
Representative Byron. Here. Representative Locke.
Present.
Representative Northrup.
Here.
Representative Oakley. Here. Representative Storer.
Here.
Representative Strock.
Here.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Here.
Co-Chairman Harshman.
Here.
Chairman Weitman.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, all are present.
Thank you, Eve. All right, first item up on our agenda this morning is ad valorem taxation. We have a bill draft 25 LSO 105, which is ad valorem taxation, payment and credit of penalties. And to walk us through that bill draft is our senior staff attorney, Josh Anderson, who got a good workout yesterday with MVP. You're back in the hot seat, Mr. Anderson. Thank you and good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This is 25 LSO 105, working draft 0.4. This was just essentially a conforming change that staff had found to bring the statute into conformance with constitutional requirements. So getting into the bill on page 2, Mr. Chairman, you see currently this relates to penalties for failing to file a statement with the Department of Revenue for certain department-assessed property. Currently, it says that if you fail to file that, those penalties collected shall be credited to the State School Foundation Program account. The Constitution in Article 7, Section 5 requires all penalties to go to the county school account. And so all this does is strike the reference to the State School Foundation account and say it shall be paid to the state treasurer and credited as provided in 81109, which does, you can see in the staff comment, put those into the public school fund of the county in which the violation occurred. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I take any questions.
I like starting out easy in the morning. It's good. Any questions for Josh? Any questions? Yeah, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, have we seen any kind of litigation on this, or is this just something we've caught and we just want to square it away?
Correct, Mr. Chairman, Representative Bear. Yeah, no legislation or no litigation or anything. This was just something that staff noted as they were looking through the statutes and thought it would be good to fix.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, thank you, sir. Public comment? Anybody wish to comment on this good little bill? Seeing none. Anybody on Zoom? Anybody get up there early this morning to talk penalties? Nobody. Man, all right. Closed public comment committee. What's your pleasure? Moved by Pappas, seconded by Oakley. Any amendments? Page 2. Question being called. Eve, please take the roll.
This is a roll call vote on 25 LSO 0105 ad valorem taxation, payment and credit of penalties. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Byron.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Northrup.
Aye.
Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Storer.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Representative Zwanitzer.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Harshman.
Aye.
Chairman Biden.
Aye.
14 aye, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Eve. All right. Next on the agenda is 25 LSO 168, nicotine product tax revisions. Committee, Senator Pappas is the one that brought this bill idea to us, and he would like to pull this and table it because he's going to bring it as a individual bill and change it up a little bit, if that's okay with the committee. Yeah, maybe we should, how do you want to do this, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Yeah, just, is there anybody here that would like, came here specifically to testify on this bill? Anybody online or?
I'm not seeing anybody. So without objection, we'll just lay this bill back and move on to the next item on our agenda, which is sales and use tax revisions, 25 LSO 172, working draft .4. Mr. Anderson, you're back. Will you walk us through this bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. 25 LSO 172, working draft 0.4, sales and use tax revisions. You'll see a staff comment there at the beginning of the bill on page 2. And all this bill really is intended to do is conform Chapter 16, which is the use tax, to match up provisions in Chapter 15 that were in the sales tax. So in a couple of recent bills, we've made changes to the sales tax provisions, but we didn't change the mirrored portions of the use tax. And you'll see a note there. I did speak with the department on this bill, and you know, the committee could consider the possibility of combining Chapter 15 and Chapter 16 sales and use taxes into just one chapter to kind of avoid this issue of essentially doubling the length of some of our bills. Some states do it that way. Other states still have them separated, as we do. I think that would probably be an interim topic if the committee wanted to go that direction, but just a note for your consideration. So getting into what the bill does, Mr. Chairman, as noted, these are all changes to Chapter 16, which is the use tax. The first change on page 3, and this is just a clarification of the definition of vendor, of who is not in the business of selling tangible personal property, and so would not be subject to collecting sales tax. On page 4, Mr. Chairman, this is simplifying how the manufacturing machinery exemption is determined. On page 5, this is removing the ability to voluntarily register as a vendor with the department. Page 6, this is just clarifying how principal residence is determined for purposes of payment of the tax. On page 7, that's just simplifying the calculation of how the tax collection credit that vendors can retain is determined. And then on to page 9, or page 8, Mr. Chairman, that's just it tolls the refund period for refund requests during the audit process. And then on page 9, that repeal language there is repealing provisions related to the manufacturing machinery exemption that was discussed on page 4. That's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Any questions? Can you give us a little more detail on these repealers, specifically? I don't have my green books in front of me. If you have that information, that'd be great.
Mr. Chairman, on page 4, subsection D, you can see there that we strike that intro language. It just makes that manufacturing machinery exempt if it's used predominantly in manufacturing tangible personal property. I think it was referenced to some NAICS codes, if I'm not mistaken. I can confirm that when I get back to it. But it's just related to that, just simplifying how that exemption is determined.
All right, and then my other question would be, the historical context of why we split the sales and use tax into 2 separate portions, and why we did that to start with. if you had that
Yeah.
information. Maybe Brenda does.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, and the department may be able to provide additional background. I believe they actually may have come in at different times. The sales tax may have been first, and then, and I think the use tax was added, potentially added later to collect those sales that happen outside of the state, and whether we can collect taxes on that. So that's my understanding of that and why it was separate. But the majority of the two chapters are identical. There are some differences between them, but the vast majority is identical between the two.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Josh? Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Open public comment. In Department of Revenue, maybe Brenda, could you come up for a quick second? Director Henson? Does anybody have a question for Director Henson?
Mr. Chairman, thank, I think too, just the chairman's question, maybe Mr. Fanning too, is just on the history of, why they're split into different titles or chapters. And just kind of a little history on that and how other states are trending on these two. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. My small piece of this history is that it was in place when we did the Title 39 recodification in 1994. I served on that, or 1995, I served on that recodification committee. So it was already separated at that point, but I know Mr. Fanning has done some research related to other states and how it's treated.
Mr. Fanning, good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Brett Fanning, Excise Tax Administrator at the Department of Revenue. Just to your point about kind of the history of this, yes, it really does go back decades. So we had sales tax here in the state of Wyoming going back to the 1930s. And then there started to become this issue of purchasing items across state lines, maybe with tax, maybe without, and just those conforming pieces that came in the later decades following that sales tax that got implemented in the 1930s. So that's kind of the history behind it. Related to combining the chapter 15 and 16, I did a variety of research, and I researched streamlined states as well. It's a mixed bag, it really is. There are states that have sales and use tax combined, and that seems to streamline this process. There are states that still have it separate, and streamlined states as well, just like Wyoming. There's also, I noticed too, there's kind of some hybrid states as well, where they've kind of got sales and use tax together, but separate. And what I mean by that is, so you have the same title that applies to sales and use taxes, but then you have exemptions all in one spot. Wyoming doesn't necessarily do that as well. We've got our sales tax exceptions, and then we've got our use tax exemptions, but they're all tied to the same portion of it. So really, Mr. Chairman, it is just a policy decision. It would decrease at least the green books as far as the size, and it would also have prevented this issue while we're up here with this conforming language. So with that, Mr. Chairman, stand for any questions.
Yep. Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Fanning. Always good to see you. Always bring good information. So my question, with your experience for either one of you, do you think would it pose difficulties if we were to combine 15 and 16? Or maybe on the other hand, do you see it creating efficiencies, or are we just doing work to do work and decrease a book? What are your thoughts on the administration of this?
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Oakley, again, in looking at this, and just as from an administration standpoint, it would streamline the discussions that we're having, because then you've got everything in one spot. Now, as Mr. Anderson referenced, there are some considerations that you would have to take in use tax. There's a handful of items that are not found in the sales tax statutes. One of the ones that I was working with before I came down this morning was there's a statute in the use tax statutes that if you pay sales tax to another state and you bring it here to Wyoming, as long as that sales tax rate is equal to or higher, you don't owe any Wyoming tax here. And so there was a taxpayer in another state, brought it into Wyoming. They'd asked if they owed us additional tax. They'd paid 8% in another state. That's something that's currently not in the sales tax statutes. And so that would be something that would need to come over. Motor vehicles, we have a very similar process here. If you purchase a motor vehicle in another state and then you bring it into Wyoming for storage, use, or consumption, that is generally not in the sales tax statutes as well. Now, our county treasurers administer and collect sales tax for us, but there's some language in there that's a little different. In our use tax statutes, we actually define what use tax is. That would be another piece that would need to come over into the sales tax side, because for use taxes due on storage, use, or consumption in Wyoming, that's something that's not in the sales tax statutes, because the implication there is you're already in Wyoming, you're collecting sales tax. As a consumer, you're paying sales tax to a vendor that's located here in Wyoming or has our economic nexus nowadays. So it does appear, again, states do it differently. That's the beauty of being different states. But as far as streamlining, reducing the draft bills, as Mr. Anderson referenced, yes, streamline it. Yes, there is a lot of work in this to make sure that they match. And we're all under the impression, at least from the excise tax side, that these should mirror each other. And that's what this bill we're talking about is doing. And it would have prevented this if they were all combined in one spot.
Thank you. While we have you up here, on page 4, line 16, where we're into the manufacturing tangible personal property, that deletion there, can you tell us what that's about? Is that a cleanup thing or is it a policy change?
Yep, great question, Mr. Chairman. It is a cleanup thing, is the answer to that. So the repealer there references two things that were discussed, I believe it was last interim. And with this manufacturing exemption, there were a couple qualifiers in there. One, you had to be a specific NAICS code that the department had assigned to you. And then the other part was it had to be a certain type of machinery that was depreciated per IRS guidelines. And so those were difficult to administer. Companies can have several NAICS codes. They can depreciate items in different ways, use different timelines. And so this is just conforming language to what we already have in the sales tax statutes right now. Mr. Chairman, it is important to note, we've been in numerous committees this interim. There is another committee that is looking at extending the manufacturing sunset definition, and they have also noted this change and the inconsistency between the sales and use tax statutes. So when I was looking at some of those bill drafts and then this bill drafts, the manufacturing piece is in both of those. So just as kind of an FYI, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions, Senator Ide?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fanning, good to see you again. Follow up kind of on page 5. I have another question, kind of like Senator Co-Chairman Beitman had. Explain that change right there. Why do you want to get rid of voluntary registration from outside on this? I don't understand why that's coming out of this draft bill here. Thank you.
Mr. Fanning?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, pleasure to see you as well. I'm glad that you asked this question. So this was a change that was made last year in our statutes. And I had testified to this committee numerous times about how many sales tax licenses we are issuing here in the state of Wyoming. And the vast majority of those folks are outside of Wyoming and quite frankly, outside of this country. And so the Department of Revenue, what we are doing is we are issuing all these licenses per this language. And then these taxpayers, they really had no intention of actually collecting sales tax from the state of, or for the state of Wyoming or even contributing to the state of Wyoming. And so our folks at the Department of Revenue would go through all these steps to issue a sales tax license, and then these out of state, out of country folks would get their exemption certificate, because that's really what the sales tax license does. It does grant the ability to put exemptions and give exemptions to vendors when they're purchasing items. The state of Wyoming doesn't see any benefit to that if they're also not going to have sales into the state of Wyoming. So our staff would issue all these licenses to folks who would not collect sales tax on our behalf. And then later on down the road, they would get failure to file notices. They would get, you're being sent to external collection notices. You would get revocation notices. All of this administrative time for folks who are not sending in sales tax to the state of Wyoming. What this change is doing is clarifying what's on the sales tax side, but it's also saying that, hey, if you're here in Wyoming and you have an imposition statute, you've got to get a license with us. It's also saying that if you're outside of Wyoming and you're making sales into Wyoming that meet our economic thresholds of 100,000, we also want you to collect that tax on our behalf. This is just to prevent those entities who are just using Wyoming for a sales tax exemption and then not contributing to the state of Wyoming.
Thank you. Okay, committee, any more questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any more public comment on working draft 172? Anybody on Zoom this morning? Nobody. Man, oh man, we wore everybody out yesterday. Okay. Committee, we'll close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Oakley. I hear a second. Seconded by Pappas. The Oakley Pappas crew is, they're on it this morning. They're awake. Okay. Any amendments? Any amendments? Any discussion? No discussion, no amendments. We'll call the question. Eve, will you please call the roll? 172.
This is a roll call vote on 25 LSO 0172, sales and use tax revisions. Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Ide.
Aye.
Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Representative Bear.
Aye.
Representative Byron.
Aye.
Representative Locke.
Aye.
Representative Northrup.
Aye.
Representative Oakley. Representative Storer.
Aye.
Representative Strock.
Aye.
Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Harshman.
He's, might be in the hallway. Hold on one sec. We'll hold it.
Hey, you want to vote?
Here he comes, here he comes. Sorry, Mr. Co-Chairman, we're cranking through these bills this morning. Oh, you did? Okay. We just want to hear your voice this morning.
Okay, sorry, committee.
Oh, you're fine.
Aye.
There it is. The dramatic pause.
Yeah.
Aye for me too.
14 aye, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Eve. Okay. Well, committee, that does it for our agenda today. We are way ahead of schedule. Any discussion from any of the committee members? Yeah, Representative Zwanitzer.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman. While we have some time, in the back of the room by that door is former Chairman Representative Pete Ellaway. And today is his birthday, and he's spending it with us. So I just wanted to wish him happy birthday, and he'll have some time to do some other stuff today. But he was here for 14 years.
Happy birthday, Mr. Illaway.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr.
So
Coach.
we've got three members, their last meeting. I'm going to start with Representative Zwanitzer, 20 years, just like that. Well done, great service, good job, great job. And Representative Oakley now, the last two sessions, 4 years, and then your job as a prosecutor, appreciate all your service to your community and our state. Well done, good job. And then Representative Northrup, your grandpa and dad both served in this body. And how many years now have you, is it? 10 years. Man, appreciate all your great service. Well done. Good job. We appreciate all of you, and everybody travel safe. And then we're going to all stay here a little bit after we adjourn for a few minutes. So nobody leave, birthday boy, and anybody else. So thank you all.
Thank you
Mr.
all.
Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.